Welcome to Ḥokhmat ha-Ḥodesh, where we explore Jewish time, wisdom, and practice through the lens of the Hebrew calendar. I am your host, Yosef Lopez, and this month we're exploring Shebhaṭ, a month whose very name reminds us of winter's reality, yet whose most famous day has undergone a transformation that should concern anyone committed to maintaining authentic transmission. The month of Shebhaṭ sits right in the heart of winter. The rains strike the land. The winds beat the trees. The land lies dormant, gathering strength for spring. And on the 15th day of this month, Ḥamisha Asar biShbaṭ, or as commonly known, BiShvaṭ, we encounter a date whose meaning has been obscured by innovation that displaces its original legal function. Today, we're going to examine what this day actually meant in classical halakha and Jewish thought, and how unauthorized transformation and innovation have totally changed it, and what it should mean for us as Jews living under renewed sovereignty with loyalty to our tradition. We'll confront uncomfortable questions about the boundary between worship commanded by God and worship we invent for ourselves. But first, as always, let's begin with the name itself. The name Shebhaṭ comes, or shouldn't be confused with Shabbat, it's shin bet tat. Tat is a little different than tav. It comes not from Hebrew, just like the other names of the month, but from Akkadian, the language of ancient Mesopotamia. The root is šabāṭu or šabāṭu, means to strike or to beat. Now, this isn't simply a poetic image, it's the agricultural reality as seen in the land of Israel. Shebhaṭ is when the winter rains strike the land, when winds beat against the walls, when the earth is pounded by seasonal storms that will, in months to come, bring forth growth. The Babylonian calendar was an agricultural calendar, and our ancestors retained these month names precisely because they reflected the seasonal cycles of the land of Israel. The name Shebhaṭ invites us to look outside, to observe the weather, to understand our place in the agricultural rhythms that govern Jewish law. This grounding in physical reality matters enormously, because when we forget that our calendar exists to regulate our relationship with the land through concrete mitzvot, we open the door to abstractions that can lead us into the realm of projection. Projection of imposing our own desires on Torah rather than receiving what has been commanded. So, what is the 15th of Shebhaṭ? If you recall back to our first episode, I believe, we examined the Mishnah that opens up Rosh Hashanah. It says that there are 4 new years. Had b'Nisan is the new year for kings and for festivals. The first of Elul is the new year for the tithing of cattle. And the first Tishri, of course, is for our years, and for our sabbatical years, and for our jubilee years, calculating those. And and then there are 2 opinions when it comes to what is Rosh Hashanah le'ilyanot, Rosh Hashanah for the trees. One opinion, which is the opinion of Beit Shammai, says that the first of Shebhaṭ is the month, while Beit Hillel says it's the 15th, Ḥamisha Asar bo, and that's Rosh Hashanah ha'elyanot. And that's the foundation of the whole thing. Now, Rosh Hashanah Elyanot, literally the new year for the trees, or the head of the year for the trees. We have to know, it's not a festival. It's not a Hag. It's not a Moed. It's not even like Hanukkah, where it's a commemoration of something. What is it then? It's no celebration. It's a fiscal boundary in the agricultural legal system. a tax day of sorts. Just as like there are many types of there's a fiscal new year in companies that usually start in July. Here, this is the new year for the calculations that we make with trees. Okay. Now, why the 15th of Shebhaṭ? It discusses this in the Talmud because by this point, most of the year's rain has fallen in the land of Israel. The sap begins rising. Fruit appearing after this date belongs for purposes of ma'aser, which is tithing, where you take a tenth of the produce of that tree. If it appears after this date, it belongs to this new agricultural year, that is to the 15th of Shebhaṭ onward. If it appears from before this date, then it belongs to the previous year. It must be calculated according to that year. So, as Rabbi Yehuda Halevi writes in the Kuzari, the Torah is exact, madbut in the Arabic, with precise demarcations. This date exists to make those precise demarcations operational. The laws of Orla, which is a prohibition of fruit from a tree's first 3 years, meaning in the first 3 years of life, any fruit that tree produces is off limits to us. It's not kasher. After those 3 years, we can start taking from the tree. So that's called orla. Anything that's in that first 3 is orla. So here we have a law that prohibits us from eating these fruits, and that depends on knowing the tree's birthday, quote unquote. Okay? Now, the laws of Ma'aser Sheni and Ma'aser Ani and other agricultural tithes depend on determining which year a fruit belongs to. Because with Ma'aser Sheni, when we're taking these second tithes, we have different years in the cycle. So I believe it's I don't remember off the top of my head, but like some years we tithe it to this thing, and some years we tithe it to this thing, and ties into when that tree was born. Now, this precision matters. Yehuda Halevi emphasizes in the Kuzari that the precepts have, quote unquote, known and precise definitions. They are not indeterminate articles to be executed according to one's whims. Religious devotion, he insists, cannot be grounded on your personal feeling and sagacity. It must be expressed according to their definitions and stipulations. Ḥamisha, Asar, biShvaṭ is a legal architecture operating within these precise definitions. It allows us to fulfill the mitzvot connected to working the land according to our Torah. In the times of the temple, farmers and Levites and those collecting tithes would have noted this date. But there's no record of celebration, no special prayers or elaborate ceremonies to mark the day. Just the practical work of counting and calculating to ensure Israel's agricultural produce supported the priests, Levites, and poor, as is commanded in the Torah. So when the temple was destroyed and sovereignty lost, the day's legal function began to fade. For centuries, it was barely mentioned. A line in the Mishnah, and that's it. Similar, as we saw in when we read that Mishnah, to the 1st of Elul, which is also a new year, for the purposes of tithing animals. A Halakhic detail for those studying theoretical and agricultural law, and seemingly nothing more. And that should have remained the story. A fiscal date waiting to regain relevance when Jews returned to agricultural life under the sovereignty of the other Jews in the land of Israel, but that's not what happened. In the 17th and 18th centuries, something happened that exemplifies a danger Rabbi Yehuda Halevi warned against in the Kuzari. There is a certain text called the Priyas Hadar, the fruit of the goodly tree, It appeared in a work called Hamdat Yamin, and it was published in Izmir in around 1731-1732. It presents an elaborate ritual and ceremony that mirrors the Seder of Pesach to be conducted on the 15th of Shvat. 4 cups of wine are to be poured. 30 fruits categorized by symbolic meanings connecting and extending to Zoharic passages and different meditations. The Seder transforms a legal date into a ritual event without precedent in the Talmud or in any Gaonic tradition. And this is what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in the Kuzari calls ijtihad, an Arabic term for striving, to draw near God through their own inventions. Halevi warns that if we make religious fervor and personal striving the measure of authenticity, we'd have to accept the practices of those who burn their children in fire, or the hermits torturing themselves in isolation, or spirit conjurers and believers in dualism, because they too claim to be striving to draw near to God. Ijtihad stands opposed to another idea for us, which is Kabbalah, authentic transmission through the unbroken chain from Sinai through the academies of the Geonim. Now, understanding what Kabbalah actually means helps us to see what's at stake here. There's a root for Kabbalah, a trilateral root for all Hebrew words. For Kabbalah, it is Kof Beth Lamed. That gives us Kibel, things like that. This root, the root of Kof Bet Lamed, QBL, is common to Hebrew and Arabic and Aramaic, and it fundamentally means a frontal, face-to-face, opposite one another. Kabbalah is reception of the person to person. The student sits before the teacher, watching their lips form the words, receiving directly from the source of authority. It's the same root as in the Arabic Qibla, the direction one faces in prayer, just as we face Jerusalem. When we pray, we must face our teacher and position ourselves correctly toward the legitimate source to receive authentic transmission. This is why the rabbis insisted when transmitting an authoritative lesson, the student should picture in his mind the image of the author of that tradition as now standing before him. Even after death, when an authoritative lesson is pronounced in his name in this world, his lips move smoothly in the tomb. The connection is alive and frontal and intimate. And here's what's beautiful. This intimacy, this tenderness of face-to-face transmission is called kissing by the rabbis. And it's how they describe God giving the oral law at Sinai. This is where authentic Jewish devotion finds warmth and connection. We don't need to invent rituals to feel connected. The connection is the Kabbalah itself, in the intimate, tender act of receiving from teacher to student, generation to generation. Lips moving together, facing one another across time. This is the true beauty and intimacy that many religious innovations claim to provide, but actually destroy by displacing authentic transmission. Ijtihad is the opposite of Kabbalah. It's turning away from the teacher. It's facing whatever direction seems right to you. It's inventing connection rather than receiving it. And no matter how tender or beautiful the invented ritual feels, it breaks the chain of intimacy that runs from Sinai to today. When we abandon Kabbalah for innovation, we don't gain intimacy, we lose it. We trade the actual face-to-face warmth of authentic transmission for the cold projection of our own desires onto Torah. Peri es hadar is ijtihad, and its origins should make us take even more pause. Yehuda Halevi's warning goes even deeper, and the origins of this text will reveal why. There was a great Halakhic authority amongst the Ashkenazim named Yaakov Emden, and he identified the Peri es hadar as emerging from circles influenced by a certain individual named Natan al-Ghazi, or Nathan of Gaza. And he was none other than the prophet and architect of the Sabbatean movement, or those who were devotees of the false Messiah, Shabbatai Sivi. Now, Nathan of Gaza proclaimed Shabbatai Sivi as Messiah in 1665. When Shabbatai Sivi converted to Islam the following year, Nathan didn't abandon the movement. Many people didn't. Instead, they developed a theology explaining apostasy as part of the messianic plan. He formulated what he called a new law that challenged traditional Torah commandments. He created a system where the mystical insight of the individual overrode the Mesorah of Halakha. Modern scholarship confirms Emden's concerns. Hemdat Yamin contains material made and authored by Nathan of Gaza. While Peri es Hadar itself doesn't explicitly promote any Sabbatean theology, thinking, practice, it emerges from that milieu, that subordinated received transmission to personal spiritual experience. The problem isn't that these texts contain mystical elements. I want to make that clear. Jewish tradition has always included what might be called as mystical experience, personal subjective encounters that are matters of the heart. The great mystics of Israel are insightful. However, their innovations do not override Jewish law. Their experiences remain private and incommunicable. The problem with anti-Maimonidean Kabbalistic ideology wasn't mysticism. It was the claim to hierarchical authority that could override our textual transmission. It was displacement of Kabbalah with innovation masquerading as tradition. This creates exactly what Yehuda Halevi warned against, a situation where we can no longer distinguish between worship commanded by God Almighty and worship invented by zealous individuals, no matter how sincere their intentions may be. Now, there's another way to mark this day, and it comes directly from the Turkish Jewish communities of Izmir and Istanbul, the same communities where Hemdat Yamim was published. And this tradition may have developed to counterbalance that tradition. This is how my family observes the 15th of Shvat, following the custom we received from Turkish Jewry. We gather and we read the 15 Shir HaMa'alot, which are the songs of ascents, Psalms 120 through 134. We read them, of course, slowly, out loud, with the te'amim, the cantillation marks that are part of reading Psalms. We also eat fruits, various fruits, many of them having to do with the land of Israel, many of them to do with whatever we happen to have on hand, but there are some traditional fruits. And for each fruit, we read a corresponding verses from Shir HaShirim that reflect the fruit. Shir HaShirim, of course, is the Song of Songs. And then before we eat, whatever fruit is reading, we recite the appropriate blessing. Now, that's it. That's the entire ceremony, ritual, custom, whatever you want to call it. This custom is called frutikas, by the way, by the Turkish Curie and Judeo-Spanish. But as you see, there is no elaborate seder that's borrowed and mirroring Passover. No 4 cups of wine mixed with mystical proportions, no meditations claiming to repair cosmic rifts, no invented symbolic systems. Instead, something far more valuable. We review passages from the Mikra, from Scripture itself. We familiarize ourselves with the Ta'amim, ensuring that we know how to chant our Torah properly. We connect the fruits of the land with the poetry of Shir HaShirim. We say blessings that Halakha prescribes. This is authentic Kabbalah. It's authentic transmission. We face the text as it is given, as it is passed on, as it is received. We position ourselves correctly toward the source. We receive what has been transmitted through the generations from the communities of Izmir and Istanbul, who themselves received from those before them. Notice what this practice does. It deepens our connection to Mikra. It trains us in proper recitation. It connects agricultural reality with scriptural poetry. It operates entirely within the framework of our revealed Torah, reading his words, saying his blessings, eating the fruits of the land of Israel. Is intimacy and warmth here, and it comes from facing the text as transmitted, not from inventing new rituals based on what seems meaningful to us. This practice acknowledges the day without inventing obligations. It celebrates within the bounds of halakha. It maintains what Yehuda Halevi insists upon, the distinction between worship with known and precise definitions, given through the Kabbalah, and worship based on personal feeling. The Turkish Jewish approach of frutikas shows us that we don't need ijtihad to mark this day meaningfully. We don't need to project our desire for cosmic significance onto a simple fiscal date. We have scripture, we have fruits, we have blessings, we have ta'amim to practice and preserve, actionable. And of course, transmitting all of that is Kabbalah, our Mesorah, our face-to-face transmission of how communities have observed this day, rooted in what we've received, oriented toward legitimate sources of our tradition. This is the difference between authentic custom and innovation, masquerading as tradition. Authentic custom flows from Mesorah, from what we have received. It operates within halakhic boundaries. It deepens our connection to what was transmitted, rather than displacing it with invention. Now, this is what loyalty to Mesorah looks like. It's not the rejection of joy or meaning, but the insistence that joy and meaning come from facing what we've received, not from turning toward what we've invented. And now, more than ever, we live in an extraordinary era. For the first time in nearly 2 millennia, Jews have sovereignty in the land of Israel. And because of that, we get to plant and harvest, and we can, in principle, observe agricultural laws of Torah law. and to implement these known and precise definitions into our social structure. Ḥamisha Asar biShvaṭ marks the moment when the sap begins rising in the tree after winter's dormancy. The rains of Shvat have soaked the earth. Life that seemed absent is stirring beneath the surface, and what appeared dead is preparing to bloom. This is precisely what is happening to us. After nearly 2 millennia of exile, of legal dormancy, when these agricultural mitzvot could not be fulfilled, the sap is rising again. Jewish sovereignty has returned, and the fiscal date is starting to regain its function. The Halakhic definitions can become operational. What was theoretical in the Mishnah becomes practical reality in the fields of Israel today. Just as the tree draws nourishment through channels designed into its very structure, we return to the precise definitions Torah provides. We let the Halakhic system function as designed. This is more profound than any invented ritual, because it's real. It's the actual restoration of Jewish life in its proper form. Torah as our law, our constitution in our land, connecting us to our native soil through the patterns of agriculture and seasonal cycles that God established. The trees fulfill their nature, and they produce fruit. So too with us. The return to the land calls us back to what was given. It's the end of the dormancy. It's the restoration of Torah law to its operational reality. And it's the sap of authentic Kabbalah, face-to-face transformation from Sinai, flowing again through the agricultural cycle as God commanded. We can innovate in how we farm, how we organize communities, and how we apply halakha to new technologies and situations, but we cannot innovate the halakha and the system itself. We cannot invent new forms of worship and claim that they carry the authority of Sinai. That distinction between legitimate innovation within the system and ijtihad that displaces the system is what the 15th of Shvat can teach us. After the long winter of exile, spring is coming. Not because we invented some new reality, but because the land and the law are being reunited and life is returning to its proper channels. To illustrate this, and what can come from understanding our law in the land properly, let us examine the first Mishnah of Masechet Peah, which is the second Masechet instead of Zira'im. The Zira'im is the first order of Mishnah. We start with Berachot, which deals with blessings, prayers, and everything what kind of blessings we make and win. And then the second Masechet here is Peah. Peah is corner, but it doesn't mean the corner, it doesn't mean a lock of hair. It means a corner of the field. And we are to leave a certain amount, a corner of the field. Whenever we harvest, we don't take everything, we leave the corner. And we'll see why. Let's check out the Mishnah. It says as follows. אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, הפיה והביקורים והרעיון ובחסדים ותלמוד תורה. אלו דברים שאדם אוכל בהם בעולם הזה, והקרן קיימת לו לעולם הבא, כיבודה ואין, וגמילו חסדים, אבל שלום בן אדם לחברו, ותלמוד תורה. ולכולם. These are things that have no measure. Peah, which is the corner of the field, like I mentioned. Bikurim, these are the first fruits of the season. Re'ayon, which is appearing before God. Gimilut Hasidim, acts of loving kindness, and Talmud Torah. Meaning, when they say these things have no measure, I mean, there's no minimum to them, right? The engaging in them is the shiur, is the measure. Now, the second part of the Mishnah is אלו דברים שאדם אוכל ברותיהם בעולם הזה, והקרן קיימת לו לעולם הבא, כיבוד אב ואם, וגין חסדים, וחבל שלום בין אדם לחברו, ותלמוד תורה, כנר כולם. So, these are the things whose fruit a person eats in this world, and the principle remains for them in the world to come. Meaning, when we engage in it here, it's nice and sweet and beneficial. And when we move on, die, and go to the next world, the world of Olam Haba, we benefit from its principle still. We're still benefiting from it, whether it's a physical benefit or a spiritual benefit. So here are the things that we eat the fruits in this world, and we enjoy the principle in the world to come. It is kibud al ve'em, and honoring one's father and mother. Yugil Hasidim, acts of loving kindness. This is what was mentioned in the Resha of the Mishnah, in the first part of the Mishnah, and making peace between people. You see that there's a problem between two individuals. You go out of your way to make peace with one another. And then it says, "What Talmud Torah." Talmud Torah is equivalent to them all. Now, the first mitzvah mentioned is Peah. It's an agricultural commandment. The corner of your field that you leave unharvested for the poor, so they can come and glean through those fields and harvest that corner that you have left, do a little something for themselves. Why does the tractate begin here? Because Peah connects everything. It's first off agricultural, and it's rooted in the land and the seasonal cycles and the physical reality of the working soil. Not only that, it's social. It's creating a structure where the wealthy support the poor, not through charity alone, but through the very design of how we farm. And on top of it, it's legal. It's operating within precise halakhic definitions: how much, when, and for whom. Now, Harambam explains that Gimilut Hasadim, the acts of loving kindness, this encompasses two categories: helping with your property and helping with your person, your body. And for us, Peah is both. It's both helping with your property and helping with your time and your money. You help with your property because you leave produce there for other people to come and take for themselves. And of course, you help with your person by structuring your entire agricultural practice around the needs of others. And here's what Harambam emphasizes. When you perform mitzvot between person and person, you find good in this world because you practiced good conduct among people. And when you practice conduct and others practice likewise, you are going to receive a similar reward from this matter. That is as Chacham Hosef or called, a horizontal society. It's not hierarchy where blessing flows down from the elites, but reciprocity where practicing good conduct creates a society where everyone benefits from each other's kindness. All the interpersonal mitzvot, Rambam writes, are included in Gimilut Hasadim. And Hillel Hazaken, Hillel the elder, when asked to teach the entire Torah standing on one foot, he says as follows: what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. This is the whole Torah, and the rest is its interpretation. Go study. Now, the phrase that Hillel uses to end that story is Ze hi HaTorah kulha ve'idah perusho zil gamor. That this is the whole Torah, and the rest is its perusho. Perusho is its interpretation, its ramifications. And that's when you should go and study those. Now, the word perusho means both interpretation and ramifications, like branches spreading out from a trunk. And you have a trunk planted in the soil, and the branches grow from it, but they remain connected to that rooted source. Now, this is related in Jewish education, the stage of education that is called Girsa. And Girsa is how the Torah becomes rooted in our mind. So how is it? Rambam explains, you'll find that Torah study outweighs them all, for through Torah study, a person merits all of this, as we explained at the beginning of our words, that study leads to action. That is primary. In order to know what to do or how to do it, you have to know what to do. But what is the foundation of Torah study? What ensures that our interpretations remain rooted in what was transmitted rather than floating free as a projection? That is Girsa. Girsa is the most elementary level of rabbinic education. It is the perfect recitation of the oral text. And it's done before one can interpret, before you can derive, before you can apply. You must have the text planted firmly with roots. Now, the word Girsa has a cognate in Arabic, and that Arabic word is gharasa. Gharasa, I got it that time. Gharasa means to plant something with roots, specifically trees and saplings, not gathering seeds on the surface simply, but planting deeply so that roots can take hold. This is the genius of our tradition. Look at the imagery here. It is a tree of life to those who can grasp it. Torah is a tree, but not a tree that floats in a mystical realm. It is a tree with roots, a tree planted in soil, a tree that draws nourishment through established channels. Girsa plants the text. Perfect recitation with the ta'amim, watching the teacher's mouth move to understand how the sounds are formed, receiving face to face, ensuring you have it exactly as transmitted. This is planting with roots. From this rooted trunk grow the perusho, the branches and the interpretations and the applications, but they remain connected to the source. They draw their life from what was planted. When you abandon, or rather I should say, when one abandons girsa for a newer or flashier innovation, when you create a ritual without rooting it in the transmitted text, when you let ijtihad displace Kabbalah, you're scattering seeds on the surface. They may sprout temporarily. They may even look impressive, but they have no roots. The first wind blows them away. So do we see how it all connects? The 15th of Shebhaṭ marks when the sap rises in the trees. Trees that are planted with roots, drawing nourishment through established channels. Peyah is the agricultural mitzvah that teaches us horizontal social responsibility. Everyone practicing good conduct, creating society, everyone benefits. And Torah is the tree of life, but it must be planted in our souls and in our minds through Girsah, and rooted in the perfect recitation of what and how it was transmitted. From this rooted study, we can come up with the Perishah, the interpretations that branch out but remain connected to the source. And Talmud Torah leads to action, to actually fulfilling Peyah, to actually fulfilling Peyah, Gimnot Hasadim, making peace between people, all the mitzvot that connect us to the land and to each other. This is what return to sovereignty means. Not inventing new mystical significance for dates, but restoring the entire system of operation. We plant trees according to Halakhic boundaries. We harvest according to Peyah, which is the corner, and Shekha, which is what we have forgotten in the field, and Lekit, that which we have dropped. They stay there to be gleaned by those who need it. So we harvest according to the Peyah. We study Torah through Girsah, planting it with roots. We develop its interpretation that remains connected to the transmitted text. And we practice Gimilut Hasadim that creates this horizontal society. We fulfill our constitution as a people in our land. The prophet saw this. In Isaiah chapter 60, verse 21, he says the following. He says, "Y tu pueblo, todos ellos justos, para siempre heredan tierra. Ramas de mis plantas, hecha de mis manos, por ser formulgado, and your people, all of them are righteous. They shall inherit the land forever. They are the branch of my planting, the work of my hand, wherein I glory." Excuse me. Let's break down that saying. Ramas de mis plantas, branches of my planting. Not branches floating free, not mystical projections disconnected from the soil, but branches rooted in God's planting, drawing life through the channels he established, producing fruit according to its own kind. Hecha de mis manos, the works of his hands, not the work of our projection onto God, not the invention of zealous individuals, but the work God designed, planted, and commanded us to cultivate. It's apples rising. Not because we invented new channels, but because we're returning to the channels God established. The tree is coming back to life because it's rooted in what was given, drawing nourishment face to face from the chain of transmission that runs from Sinai to today. This is Ḥamisha Asar biShbaṭ, the marking of agricultural awakening that reminds us we are a people rooted in land and law, drawing life through the channels of Kabbalah, producing fruit through mitzvot that connect us to each other and to the soil beneath our feet. Plant with roots. Let the sap rise through the established channels and watch the branches spread out from the rooted trunk. This is restoration. This is awakening. And this is Torah becoming operational again in the land where it belongs. Just to reiterate, I'm not condemning any sort of celebration. I'm not saying eating fruit or planting trees is wrong. I'm not even saying anyone who participates in a BiShvaṭ Seder is doing something terrible. It's like the fruit on Gan Eden. Eating from the tree was not the problem. What I'm saying is we must know the difference between what God commanded and what we invented. The BiShvaṭ Seder, the 4 cups, the elaborate structure, the mystical meditations, none of it's from Sinai. It's not from the Talmud. It's not even from the Gaonim. It's 17th, 18th century innovation, which connections to Shabbat and Tzvi, created by those who, however sincere, acted on their own personal feelings and sagacity rather than a received transmission. As Yehuda Halevi warns about the golden calf, the sin isn't necessarily in the intention. The sin is in creating a worship of their own volition, rather than performing what God had commanded. The sin is in projection, in imposing our desires for meaningful ritual onto God in an attempt to appease Him or to draw close. You can participate in BiShvaṭ Seder if you choose, but don't confuse it with authentic Kabbalah, or authentic transmission of Jewish ideas and practice. Don't treat invented ritual as if it carries the weight of Torah law with its known and precise definitions. The danger isn't the ritual itself. The danger is in losing the ability to distinguish between worship, specified in the covenant, specified by the Berith, and our own imagination that is run through zeal. The danger is in allowing projection to displace that precision. The danger is in mistaken fervent striving or ijtihad with this proper transmission. In many of the works that cover the decline of the Spanish Golden Age, we see that innovative practices displaced the transmitted Kabbalah of the Geonim, and that the consequences ended up being catastrophic. That study declined, leadership faltered, communities that had sustained Jewish intellectual life for centuries collapsed. The Spanish expulsion of 1492 came at the end of 2 centuries in which projection and innovation displaced the textual precision. Sabbateanism showed us the endpoint of this process. When zeal claims authority over halakha, when innovation becomes indistinguishable from tradition, when we worship according to what seems right to us rather than what God specified, Torah itself becomes negotiable. We enter the realm of avodah zarah, even while calling it service of the God of Israel. And we cannot afford that confusion. This is why we must be scrupulously honest about sources, about authority, and about what has known and precise definitions from Sinai and what we have projected onto Torah and our desire for meaningful ritual. Shvat, the month when rain strikes, the month when winter beats against the land, the month when on the 15th day, we mark the agricultural new year for trees according to our tradition. This month calls us back to foundations, back to the land, back to law with its exact demarcations, back to recognizing that our calendar exists to regulate our relationship with the land, not through rituals we invent. Ḥamisha Asar BiShbaṭ reconnects us to the Halakhic framework that has always governed Jewish life. Our bond with Israel is deeply rooted, running through a collective consciousness, like sap through a tree. We are bound to this land by covenant, by history, and by the tender care woven into our legal thinking, by the agricultural rhythms that shaped our calendar to our souls. This isn't about projecting new meaning onto an old date. This is truly about awakening to obligations defined, obligations set. Now obligations we can fulfill again, that can make us whole as a people in our land. Enjoy and celebrate if you wish. Eat fruit, plant trees, acknowledge the day's agricultural significance, but remember Yehuda Halevi's warning: worship must conform to what God specified and not to our own personal feeling. Remember the lessons of the golden calf. Even sincere zeal becomes avodah zarah when it creates worship of our own volition. Remember the distinction between authentic Kabbalah and ijtihad. The greatest restoration we can accomplish isn't a ritual innovation. It's return to Torah law and its precision. It's rebuilding a society where worship operates within God's known and precise definitions and not our projections. That's the true significance of the 15th of Shabbat. This has been Ḥokhmat ha-Ḥodesh. Until next month, may your study be planted with roots, and may the branches of your practice bear fruit. I want to thank all of you, our listeners, your feedback, your questions, your thoughtful engagement. They're meaningful and valuable. This conversation doesn't end when the episode does. It continues in the questions you ask and in the discussions you have. A special thank you to all of our patrons who support us on Patreon. You make this podcast possible. Your support allows us to continue this work. If you'd like to become a patron and join this community of learning, you can find us on Patreon under Horizontal Media. If this episode gave you something to think about, share. Share it with someone who will engage with the ideas, whether they agree or push back. That's how Masorah works. Through conversation, through transmission, through exchange that keeps Torah alive across generations. Until next time, fruticas alegres y albermos alejandro shalom.